She stood at the kitchen window, twirling her wedding ring like it was a loose coin in her fingers. Left, right, pause. A soft clink against the marble countertop. Then silence. I didn't say a word. I just stood behind the half-closed pantry door, holding a bag of flour I didn't even need, pretending to measure my breathing. That was the third time this week. The third time she took it off before someone showed up. Tonight, it was Zach. She said he was a coworker. Said he was just dropping off a file she forgot at the office. Right. At 10:42 p.m., wearing cologne so strong I could smell it from the hallway. She poured wine. Not the cheap stuff we usually save for Friday. The one we were supposed to open for our anniversary next month. She used the nice glasses. The stemmed ones we got as a wedding gift and never touched. And she changed. Into the black blouse she said was too dressy for work. Paired it with jeans to make it casual. I noticed the lip gloss too. The one I thought she'd lost. I watched her fix her hair in the microwave reflection. Not for me. Not for herself. For him. Then she whispered something that still hasn't left my ears. Soft. Practiced. Like it wasn't the first time. She said, "Okay, just keep it light. Flirty, but not desperate." My chest tightened. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was blank. That terrifying emotional flatline where you realize your body gave up on reacting long before your mind caught up. The doorbell rang. She jumped, not with nerves, but excitement. Like a teenager sneaking out. And then it happened. She put her ring in the junk drawer, nestled between expired batteries and old coupons. Like it meant nothing. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just listened as she opened the door, and in a voice I hadn't heard in years. Not since the early days, she said. "You made it. I was starting to think you'd bail." He laughed. Deep, confident. A voice I instantly hated. I stood there in that pantry for 2 hours. They stayed in the living room. Talking. Laughing. A wine bottle opened. Then another. I don't think they noticed the front door was slightly ajar the whole time. Or that I slipped out barefoot into the cold. And as I stood outside, staring at our porch light flickering above me, the words kept playing over and over in my head like a broken recording. "Are you jealous?" she'd asked me once. No, I wasn't. I was done. And what I did next made sure she knew exactly what that meant. I came back an hour later. Not because I had a plan. Not because I was ready to confront her. I came back because I had nowhere else to go. I walked in through the back door quietly. So quietly it scared me. The kind of silence that makes you wonder if you've already become invisible. The lights in the living room were off, but the kitchen still smelled like citrus and cinnamon. She must have lit one of her fancy candles. The ones she said were too good to waste on us. I stood there staring at the wine glasses. One of them was still warm, lipstick smudged on the rim. His glass was empty, bone dry like he licked it clean. I didn't check the bedroom. I didn't want to know. Or maybe I already knew, and knowing was safer than seeing. I sat down at the dining table, placed my phone face down, and stared at the crumbs left behind on the cutting board. She'd sliced brie and strawberries, laid them out like she used to on our movie nights. I couldn't tell what stung more, that she put in effort, or that it was never for me anymore. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for my legs to go numb. Long enough to notice she'd taken down the picture frame that used to hang above the fireplace, the one from our second anniversary trip to Lake George. The hook was still there, empty, like a wound she didn't bother covering. When she finally walked in, barefoot, hair messy, sleeves rolled, she didn't flinch. Didn't look shocked to see me sitting there in the dark. She just froze, looked at the glasses, and said, "You scared me. I thought you went to bed." I didn't answer. She didn't ask where I'd been. She never did anymore. Instead, she poured herself water and leaned against the counter like this was just another Tuesday. Then she asked the same question, but this time, without a smile. "Are you jealous?" Her voice was quieter this time. Not playful. Almost clinical. I looked at her for a long time before answering. Took in the tiny details. The earring she forgot to take off, the slight redness on her neck, the absence of her ring. I finally said no, just done. She stared at me, really stared, like she was trying to figure out who I was, or maybe what version of me was left. Her lips parted slightly, like she was about to respond. But she didn't. She just nodded once, slowly, like she expected this moment to come, but still didn't know what to do with it when it did. I stood up, walked to the junk drawer, and pulled out the ring she'd tucked there like a used receipt. I held it between two fingers, and placed it on the counter next to her water glass. "I hope you find whatever you're chasing," I said. "But it's not me anymore." And I walked out. But this isn't the end. Because the next morning, something happened that changed everything. And I realized she wasn't just careless. She was calculated. She knew exactly what she was doing. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of rage, not out of heartbreak, just a strange, empty alertness, like my body had too many tabs open and none of them would load. I drove around until sunrise, windows down even though the air had turned cold. My phone vibrated a few times in the cup holder. I didn't look. I didn't want to see a "where are you" text that was really just damage control in disguise. When I got back to the house, her car was gone. No note this time. Not even a post-it. That small mercy she used to give me had disappeared like everything else. I walked into the kitchen and found her wine glass still there, untouched since last night. But this time, something was different. I don't know what possessed me to check her laptop bag. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe I was just done pretending not to notice things that were screaming at me. The zipper was open. Inside, I found her tablet. Still unlocked. One swipe, and I saw the browser open. She hadn't cleared anything. She didn't even try. First tab. Non-disclosure agreements for consultants. Template. Second tab. Prenuptial loopholes in New York State. Third tab. A PDF attachment from someone named Devin Crosswell. The subject line read, "Here's the clean version you asked for. No mention of your husband anywhere." I sat down so fast, I nearly knocked the chair over. I opened the file. It was a proposal. A multi-page corporate-style document. Branding, pitch, profit estimates. And right there, in the opening paragraph, was my wife's name listed as a private partner in an exclusive influencer marketing consultancy for luxury hospitality brands. I'd never heard of it. She'd never mentioned it. And the worst part? She used our savings to fund it. Our savings. The account we built together for our someday dreams. The cabin in Maine, the second try at IVF, maybe even a move somewhere quieter. She drained almost $42,000 over 3 months and moved it into a private business account under her maiden name. I felt my vision blur. Not from tears. From the kind of betrayal that's so cold, so strategic, that you can't even tell where the love ended and the manipulation began. And then my phone buzzed again. This time I looked. It was a message from a number I didn't recognize. Just 4 words. "You deserve the truth." Attached was a photo. I tapped it open. It was her, in a restaurant I didn't recognize, in the same black blouse from last night, holding hands across the table with someone who was definitely not Zach. Not Devin either. This man was older, well-dressed, with a familiar face I couldn't quite place. But the way they looked at each other, it wasn't a fling. It wasn't casual. It was something planned. Like a future they'd already started building without me. I zoomed in on the photo. Behind them, blurry but still clear enough, was a logo on the window, the Arlo Club. Private. Members only. $10,000 annual fee. She once told me it was pretentious nonsense. And yet there she was, seated at a window table that required a reservation 6 weeks in advance. Everything I thought I knew about her was gone. And whoever sent that message, they knew more than I did. This wasn't just infidelity. This was a setup. I sat in the car across from the Arlo Club for 3 hours without moving. I watched expensive shoes walk across cobblestone, valet drivers open doors like choreographed dancers, and couples, perfectly polished and painfully untouchable, walk in without a second glance. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe confirmation. Maybe closure. Maybe just proof that I wasn't losing my mind. The longer I sat there, the more I realized this wasn't about one dinner or one man. This was systematic. Vanessa didn't just fall out of love. She strategized her exit like a merger deal. Cold. Strategic. With contingency plans. I drove home with a pit in my stomach. That photo hadn't just exposed an affair. It exposed a life I wasn't even part of anymore. A hidden world. But whoever sent that message, "You deserve the truth," didn't follow up. No name. No reply. I tried calling, but the number had already been disconnected. Disposable. I paced the kitchen until the floor creaked under my feet. And then I made a decision. I went into the attic. That's where we kept the old storage bins, college documents, wedding stuff, boxes labeled taxes in Sharpie. I wasn't looking for anything specific. Just something real. Something from before all of this. Instead, I found a journal. Hers. I never knew she kept one. It wasn't hidden, not really. Just sitting in an old file crate next to our wedding guest book. I opened it, expecting poetry or scraps of emotion from years ago. Instead, I found pages marked with headings like Phase 1, Test Boundaries, Track Emotional Cycles. Each entry read like an observation log. March 4th. He didn't notice the new shoes. He never does. I almost laughed when he said he missed my laugh. May 19th. Resentment fading, dangerous. Need to pull back physically. August 10th. Fund separation account soon. Avoid confrontation. Maintain control. It was like reading a corporate psych profile of me. I flipped to a page marked simply, Exit Options. There were two columns. One labeled Clean Break, the other Slow Fade. Under Slow Fade, she listed bullet points. Deplete emotional energy. Blame stagnation. Initiate therapy, blame projection. Rebuild reputation separately. Shift financial leverage. And then, at the bottom, Clayton will fold. He always folds. I sat there with that sentence burning a hole through my chest. She had written me down to a formula. Predicted my reactions like I was a lab rat, not her husband. And the worst part? She was right. I did fold. Every time. I folded when she came home late. Folded when she started keeping secrets. Folded when she laughed at me for crying during a fight. I folded because I kept telling myself this was just a phase. That marriage meant patience. That everyone grows apart. And maybe we just needed to find our way back. But this wasn't growing apart. This was a quiet execution. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. A separate loose paper tucked inside the journal. A printed email. Subject: New identity quote, private transfer option. Sender: some consulting firm in Oregon. I didn't know what it meant. But the phrase name change assistance and international banking route were underlined in pen. She wasn't just planning to leave me. She was planning to disappear. I couldn't sit still after what I'd read. My mind wasn't racing, it was unraveling. My hands kept trembling, not out of fear, but because everything that felt stable, even the lies I'd learned to live with, was now cracking into something worse. Something I hadn't been prepared for. I wasn't just being replaced. I was being erased. I scanned that journal 3 more times like some hidden clue would leap out and explain the unthinkable. But there it was, black and white, laid out like a corporate offboarding plan. Vanessa wasn't leaving because of an affair. She was executing a pivot, a clean break from a life she decided was no longer profitable. Her words, not mine. And that man in the restaurant photo? The one holding her hand across white linen and wine glasses? I finally figured out who he was. Not because of the face, that didn't click. It was his watch. A specific silver Tag Heuer with a cracked bezel and navy strap. The same one my former boss, Elliot Grant, used to wear every day at the firm before he took early retirement. I used to admire it when I was still naive enough to think people earned luxury from hard work. It hit me like a freight train. Vanessa never worked with Elliot. They'd never even met. At least that's what she told me a year ago when I asked if she knew where he landed after the firm restructured. She shrugged and said, probably halfway to Bali or prison. Now I knew why she lied. Elliot wasn't halfway to Bali. He was halfway through building a second life with my wife. But what destroyed me most wasn't that she was cheating with someone I used to respect. It was realizing that everything, from her new consulting company to the secret funds, was likely engineered with his help. He knew how to hide money. He knew how to structure shell entities. And clearly, he knew how to manipulate desperate women looking for a way out. Unless she wasn't desperate. Maybe she was always looking. I grabbed my phone and called the only person who'd ever known both me and Vanessa well enough to connect dots I couldn't see. My sister, Darla. When she picked up, I didn't even say hello. I just said, "How long have you known?" She went silent. Too long. And then, finally, "Clay, I didn't want to be the one to tell you. I thought if I stayed out of it." "She's leaving the country," I interrupted. "Or at least, she's planning to." I know. Those 2 words nearly dropped me to the floor. She told me that Vanessa had been asking questions 6 months ago about whether our parents still had property in Canada, whether they ever changed the deed, whether I still kept copies of the documents at home. She thought it was weird, but brushed it off. I asked her why she never told me. And Darla, God love her, but she's brutally honest, said, "Because I thought you already knew. Or worse, that you were okay with it." That was the moment I realized just how far I'd let things rot. I had become so passive, so invisible, that people didn't even assume I'd fight back anymore. Not even family. The rest of the day, I spent spiraling through emails, bank statements, old shared folders I hadn't opened in over a year. I found dozens of receipts I never saw before. Legal consultations, high-end shipping companies, temporary storage units in cities she never told me she visited. But one email stood out. A reply from Elliot's personal email to Vanessa, dated 2 weeks ago. Everything's in place. Just say when. There was an attachment. A lease agreement. Barcelona. A flat overlooking the water. 2 names on the contract. Vanessa Langley. Elliot Grant. No mention of me. It was real. It was already happening. They weren't planning to run away. They were planning to start over, while I was still standing in the ashes. And something inside me broke. But not in the way she expected. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to become someone she didn't plan for. I didn't sleep again. Couldn't. I didn't even lie down. I just sat at the dining table, lit by the dim glow from the stove clock, and stared at the contract printout from Barcelona. Her new life. Her fresh start. A place she'd already claimed, not once thinking I'd ever know. Or maybe worse. She knew I'd find out eventually, but assumed I'd be too weak to stop her. She was wrong. So I waited. I waited like a man with nothing left to lose and 100 pounds of truth burning a hole through his chest. At 6:37 a.m., she walked through the door. Not sneaking. Not ashamed. She walked in humming. She dropped her bag on the floor like she'd just come back from yoga, stretched her arms, and said, "Morning." I didn't respond. I was staring straight ahead, hands folded in front of me, like I was the one who owned this house, and she was the stranger trespassing through it. And maybe she was. A beautiful, brutal stranger who wore my wife's skin and perfume. She stopped when she saw the folder on the table. The moment her eyes landed on it, the humming died. I watched her brain scan the scene like a crime scene investigator. The unfolded lease, the journal, the screenshot of the wire transfer to the shell company. I saw her freeze when she noticed her passport missing from her work bag. She didn't need to ask where it went. She already knew. I leaned forward and said, not calmly, not angrily, just cleanly, "You've been preparing your exit. Now I'm preparing mine." She didn't speak. She didn't deny it. She looked at me like I had violated her privacy. That was the part that almost made me laugh. The sheer entitlement of betrayal. The idea that I was somehow out of line for knowing the truth. When she finally spoke, her voice was measured. Professional. Like we were discussing bad numbers in a quarterly report. "I can explain." "No," I said. "You really can't." She sat down across from me. Same chair she used to laugh in during Sunday brunches. Same seat where she once told me she wanted to grow old with me. Now she sat there like a client negotiating damage control. "You were never supposed to find out this way," she said. "I was never supposed to find out at all." She sighed. Not out of guilt. Out of inconvenience. Like I had ruined her schedule. "I wasn't trying to hurt you, Clay. I was trying to survive." By wiping me out. She rubbed her temples. "You wouldn't understand." I pulled out a flash drive and slid it across the table. "That has copies of everything. Your emails. Your files. The lease. The NDA drafts. All of it." Her eyes narrowed. You've been spying on me?" "No. Just finally paying attention." She sat back in her chair, and for a brief second, I saw something crack in her face. Not remorse, not even fear. It was calculation. The way you look at a chessboard when the game just flipped against you. "I don't want this to get ugly," she said. "Then you shouldn't have made it ugly," I replied. We sat there in silence, the weight of years pressing down on the walls. I wasn't yelling. She wasn't crying. This wasn't a movie scene. This was 2 people sitting in the ashes of a lie too big to sweep under the rug. I stood up, walked over to her bag, and pulled out the second phone she thought I didn't know about. I placed it on the table and turned it on. The wallpaper was a photo of her and Elliot, taken on the balcony of the Barcelona flat. She didn't even bother hiding it. "I'm giving you 2 options," I said quietly. "You leave clean, or I burn it all down." Her lip twitched, like she wanted to ask what "burn it down" meant. She didn't get the chance. Because right then, the doorbell rang. And on the other side of that door was the last person she expected to see. Vanessa's face drained of color before the second chime. She turned to me, then to the door, then back, calculating again. But there was something new this time, not just panic. Recognition. Whoever was behind that door wasn't Elliot. This wasn't part of her exit strategy. I watched her hesitate, lips slightly parted, body frozen, like her brain was screaming, but her legs had stopped listening. "I'll get it," I said calmly. "No, wait," she snapped, reaching for my arm. Her nails dug into my wrist, not hard, but sharp enough to remind me she wasn't in control anymore. I pulled away from her like she was radiation. I opened the door. A man in his mid-40s stood on the porch, dressed in a navy coat, leather gloves, and a look that said he hadn't slept in days. He didn't glance at Vanessa. He looked straight at me. "Clayton Elridge?" he asked. I nodded. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. "My name is Jason Merrill," he said. I think my wife is working with yours." Behind me, I heard Vanessa gasp, a quiet, involuntary sound, like someone had pressed a bruise they thought had healed. Jason looked past me and saw her standing there, and I watched as fury bloomed behind his eyes like a slow-moving storm. "She told me you were some sad husband who didn't get it," he continued, voice trembling now. "She said you wouldn't fight back, that you were just background noise." I let him in. Vanessa backed away slowly, like the walls were closing in on her. She looked at Jason like she'd seen a ghost. And maybe she had, because he wasn't supposed to exist anymore. He was supposed to be deleted, same as me. Jason pulled a thick envelope from his coat and tossed it onto the table. Dozens of printed emails spilled out, along with passport photos, signed agreements, rental contracts in 3 countries, Elliot and Vanessa's signatures on every one of them. "She used my wife's credentials to launder half of Elliot's money offshore," Jason said. "I found the wire trails. The fake LLCs. They used my wife's name. And yours. You know what that means." Vanessa tried to speak, but he cut her off. "It means they framed you too as co-conspirators. Fall guys." I stared at Vanessa, who now looked visibly sick. "How long were you planning to let me take the hit for this?" I asked. Her mouth moved, but no words came out. Jason threw a USB stick on the table. Every message, every transaction, every digital breadcrumb. I traced them all, but I need someone on the inside to corroborate. Someone they didn't expect to wake up. And there it was. My choice. To stay the broken, quiet man she'd written in her journal. The man who always folds. Or to finally stand up and burn the whole goddamn illusion to the ground. I looked at her. She opened her mouth to beg. I saw it coming. The tears, the apology, the same theater she used to get out of late-night arguments and confession moments. But now, even her panic felt rehearsed. I turned to Jason. "Let's bury them." Vanessa screamed. She lunged toward the USB, but I grabbed it first. "You planned everything, Vanessa. But you forgot one thing." She froze, eyes locked on mine. "I'm not your husband anymore." She blinked once. Just once. Then her shoulders slumped, and she finally stopped pretending. For the first time, she looked like a stranger who got caught robbing a house she used to own. I watched her walk to the bedroom, slowly, like someone heading to the gallows. Jason turned to me. "You know this is going to get messy, right?" I nodded. "I'm counting on it." 2 weeks passed like a slow-motion free-fall. Meetings with lawyers. Statements to financial investigators. Digital forensics teams picking apart transactions like threads on a ripped suit. Vanessa stopped trying to talk after that morning. Her voice vanished. Not out of guilt, but strategy. She lawyered up fast, but so did Jason and I. We weren't dumb men anymore. We were men who knew too much. The evidence Jason brought, combined with what I already collected, painted a clear picture. Not just of betrayal, but of intent. Elliot was the architect, yes, but Vanessa, she was the silent engineer. She signed the papers. She managed the accounts. She funneled money under both of our names. And the more we dug, the more we uncovered. People they'd used, money they'd buried, stories they rewrote while we slept next to them. But here's the part that surprised me most. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like relief. I wasn't obsessed with punishing her. I didn't want her to suffer. I just wanted to exist outside of the version of me she had created, the spineless, background character who never asked questions. That man died the moment she slid her ring into the junk drawer. Vanessa ended up taking a plea deal. She testified against Elliot in exchange for reduced charges. I didn't attend the court hearings. I didn't care to watch her trade blame like currency. Jason and I handed everything to the right people and walked away with clean hands, but not clean hearts. That would take time. 6 months later, I moved. Not far, just enough. I rented a quiet house outside the city with a little garden in the back. I started working freelance, brand copywriting, nothing flashy, and found that I liked the quiet. I liked choosing silence, not just surviving inside it. One morning, I got a letter. No return address. Just my name, written in the same cursive she used to write birthday cards. Inside was a single line on a torn page. You were never small. I just needed you to be. No apology. No explanation. Just that. I folded it in half and threw it in the fireplace. Not out of anger. Out of finality. You see, the best revenge wasn't watching her fall. It was watching me stand. I started taking long walks in the mornings. I read again. I laughed at things that weren't tied to survival. I adopted a dog named Rufus, a lazy golden mutt who snores louder than any human I've ever met. I called my sister more. I told her I loved her when I meant it. I even started seeing someone, slowly, cautiously. Her name's Lena, and she never makes me feel like I'm auditioning to be heard. And one day, while we were cooking together, she looked at me and asked, "Are you jealous?" I didn't flinch. I smiled. "No," I said. "Just finally okay."